All right, let's talk about the secret high-stakes game that central banks are playing every single day. It's a fascinating story about promises, temptations, and the one thing that keeps the whole system from falling apart: reputation. So let's get right to the heart of it with this puzzle. I mean, it seems pretty straightforward, right? A central bank wants low inflation, the public wants low inflation. So why can't the bank just promise it and, do it? Well, as we're about to see, there's a hidden temptation that makes this promise incredibly hard to keep. To really get this, you have to think about monetary policy less like someone just turning dials and more like a strategic game. And this game has two main players. Let's meet them. On one side, you've got the policymaker. Think of the central bank. Now, of course, they want low inflation, but they're also tempted by other things, like giving the economy a short-term boost or helping the government manage its debt. And their secret weapon? The power to create surprise inflation. On the other side, you've got the public. That's us. We just want stable prices and a predictable economy. And our superpower? We learn. We watch what the bank does, and we adjust our expectations accordingly. So what exactly is this secret weapon, this surprise inflation? It's not just high inflation, it's inflation that is specifically higher than what everybody was expecting. And for a little while, that surprise can have some really powerful effects. So why on earth would a policymaker want to do this? Well, there are a few really tempting reasons. First, a quick jolt of unexpected inflation can actually juice the economy for a bit, maybe even lower unemployment. Second, if you're a government with a mountain of debt, a surprise burst of inflation is like a magic trick. It literally shrinks the real value of what you owe. And third, it kind of acts like a surprise tax on everybody's savings, raising money for the government. Okay, but here's the catch. This power to create surprises, it comes with this huge, massive trap. When a policymaker has total freedom, what economists call discretion, to chase these short-term wins, it can lead to a situation where literally everyone ends up losing. Here's how the cycle works. First, the policymaker pulls the trigger on surprise inflation, and for a moment, the economy gets a nice little boost. But here's the thing, people aren't dumb. They catch on. They see what happened, and they start to expect higher inflation in the future. So what do? They demand higher wages, higher interest rates, they adjust. And just like that, the surprise element is gone. The economic boost disappears completely. And this is the killer part. You end up stuck in a really bad spot. The policymaker keeps inflation high because the temptation to spring a surprise is always there. But because the public sees it coming, the benefit of that surprise never actually shows up. You get all the pain of high inflation with absolutely none of the bane. So that brings up a pretty obvious question, right? If just letting the policymaker do whatever they want leads to this trap, what about the exact opposite? What if we make them commit to a super strict rule, like we promise to keep inflation at 0% no matter what? This table really lays out how the policymaker thinks. Look, the absolute worst case scenario for them is pure discretion. All that pain, no gain. The second best option, actually following a low inflation rule, that's pretty good. But the absolute best, most tempting outcome from their point of view, it's to promise the rule, get everyone to believe you, and then cheat. You get that huge economic boost from the surprise, and for a split second, it feels like you've pulled off the perfect move. And this gets us to the heart of the problem, summed up perfectly in this quote from the original paper by Barro and Gordon. It's that constant, nagging desire to get that first best outcome, that one-time cheat that makes it so incredibly hard to just stick to the pretty good second best outcome of a stable rule. The temptation is always lurking. So, if the temptation to cheat is that powerful and a simple rule on a piece of paper is just too fragile, what could possibly enforce the promise? It turns out the answer isn't a law or a contract, but something way more valuable and a whole lot easier to lose. Seriously, think about it. If you could get a huge benefit today with what seems like no immediate cost, what would stop you? It's not about morals or a written contract in this game. It's about something much more powerful in the long run. The answer is reputation, the one thing that's easy to lose and incredibly hard to win back. And in this model, reputation isn't about being liked or being popular. Nope, it's all about cold, hard math. A policymaker will only stick to their promise if the long-term cost of wrecking their reputation is bigger than the short-term win they'd get from cheating. It's all about incentives. So what is this punishment we're talking about? It's a total meltdown of credibility. The moment the policymaker cheats, boom, the public stops trusting them. And what happens then? Everybody goes right back to that awful high inflation game we saw before. The central bank loses its power, and everyone is worse off, at least for a while. Okay, so we've got the trap of doing whatever you want, and we've got the problem of a perfect rule that's too easy to break. The real answer, where things actually land in the real world, is somewhere in between. It's a credible compromise. And here's a really critical insight. An ideal rule, like promising 0% inflation forever, it's just not believable. Why? Because the payoff for cheating on a 0% rule is massive. The temptation to create just a little bit of surprise inflation to get a big economic boost is almost always going to be stronger than the fear of losing your reputation. The promise just isn't credible. So the policymaker doesn't aim for the ideal rule. They aim for the best enforceable rule. This is the lowest possible inflation rate they can promise, where that temptation to cheat is perfectly balanced out by the punishment of losing their reputation. And what does this rule look like? Well, you can think of it like a compromise, a weighted average. It sits somewhere between that perfect world of zero inflation and that terrible world of high inflation discretion. It means you get a positive rate of inflation, but it's much lower than what you'd get if reputation wasn't a factor. So what tips the scales? What determines where we land? The key factor is the policymaker's discount rate, which is just a fancy way of saying how much they care about the future versus right now. A patient policymaker, kind of like the tortoise, cares deeply about their long-term reputation. They'll keep inflation low. But an impatient policymaker, the hare, just wants that boost now. They're going to be okay with higher inflation. And this, by the way, is exactly why things like central bank independence and long terms for governors are so important. It's all designed to make them more like the tortoise. And this isn't just some abstract academic exercise, right? This model makes some powerful predictions about the real world. It explains why inflation often creeps up during wars or big recessions, times when the temptation to juice the economy is at its highest. It tells us why countries with a lot of debt might be more likely to have inflation problems. It even helps us understand the stagflation of the 1970s. And it predicts that central banks will usually try to lean against the wind, easing policy when the economy is weak. And all of this leaves us with one last, really tough question. This model shows us that a central bank's reputation is like a savings account, built up slowly over years of careful, disciplined action. But in a severe crisis, when the temptation to pull off a big surprise to save the economy is enormous, should a central bank spend that credibility? That is the ultimate trade-off, and it's the secret game of monetary policy that's being played out as we speak. Thanks for digging into this with me.